All right, you guys ready to talk about Tekken 7 is 3? Did you guys watch the presentation? I thought it was a cool little presentation. They did a good job. It was long. So the video started with Kunimitsu stuff, and then they talked about improvements they're making, and then they talked about online stuff. They talked about the changes they're going to make to the game and balance and stuff like that. They were like, we're going to double the life bar and lower the damage. And everybody was like, holy shit, what? I thought it was a really cool thing. And I think now there are more and more Japanese companies who are finally like, you know what we should do? Talk to our fans. Particularly Capcom and Bandai Namco have started to do these longer talks where they're like, hey, this is the changes we're making, this is what's happening, etc., etc. Like, they're realizing, right? They're like, we got to actually communicate with our fans and tell them what the fuck's happening. This is a good step in the right direction for companies like this, right? Before we get in too deep into this, there's one important thing to get out of the way first. Harada says Tekken 7 equals 3. The game's got rollback. Lots of people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. If the game has rollback, it's not very obvious, and the game behaves like a delay-based game. And Harada's like, Tekken 7 is 3. And they're like, it behaves like he's like, Tekken 7 is 3. The reality of the situation is, who gives a fuck? Who cares what Harada says? Who cares what me or anybody else has to say? The online experience currently is bad. It's not good in terms of how it operates and connects you to people. It's not good in terms of the lack of modes and instant rematch and how the lobbies function and all that kind of stuff. So who gives a shit what Harada says it is, and who gives a shit what I say it is? The current experience is bad. So if what they change ends up making it better, that's good. Whether the current model is some kind of rollback model that behaves like delay, or it's Tekken 7 equals 3, who knows? You guys online right now try to play someone in the same city as you or the same state as you, and you're like, bro, why does this feel so bad? That shouldn't be happening regardless of what the model is. Someone knows, someone just can't say it. Yeah, it's very unclear. A lot of what he says in this, we kind of just have to make guesses or try to take what he says and turn it into something that we know exists. So this is the first thing that happens. He's talking about Wi-Fi before this, right? The first thing on the slide up here, he's talking about the Wi-Fi indicator. And then they want to go down to the second point. So he says, everybody talks about netcode, of course. And that's one aspect I'm thinking about improving. I love this sentence. I love that he laughs. How could they not think it incorporates rollback? It's so obvious. I love his laugh there. It's my favorite part about that sentence. There's a little game out there. You guys might have heard of it. It's called Mortal Kombat. It has rollback, right? We know it has rollback. When you look at this little chart where they're doing a little GDC talk and they're talking about the differences between rollback and lockstep, right? Lockstep is delay-based netcode in this instance. They have a little chart and they say, like, these are the things that define rollback, and these are the things that define lockstep. So when you play Tekken 7 online, playing against someone who is, you know, maybe in a state over, 2 states over, does the game feel responsive? Does it feel exactly like offline play? Or does it feel like you're underwater and you're you know, the things you're inputting, it's like, why did that not come out? Does it feel like the things you're inputting are being missed? You know, if the answer is no, that the things you're hitting don't feel like they're coming out, and it does feel like it's underwater and the game is slowing down and it feels chunky and stuff, it's not behaving like what we would call over here like a rollback model, right? It's behaving more like a lockstep model. If you play somebody who's right next to you, somebody who's in the same neighborhood as you, and then you play someone who's across the country from you, does it feel like you input your combos exactly the same? You know, who cares how it looks visually? Because if it's rolling back all the time, it's rolling back all the time. But it feels the exact same. It feels like offline in both scenarios. That's not the case, right? So it really ticks all the boxes in a lockstep model. When they say visually smooth and they say lockstep is visually smooth, so this over here, what they mean by visually smooth is that in lockstep, there is, in delay-based netcode, there is no, like, I hit a button and then on your screen, like, you're standing there and all of a sudden you're like, huh, and you're doing the animation, right? By visually smooth, what they mean is the animations play out from start to finish every time. So, you know, Harada says, like, how did you guys don't believe us that we've got rollback? Like, how do people not believe us? And it's like, well, we just, I don't know, use our eyes and hands and muscle memory and compare it to other things that have rollback and delay, and, you know, seems pretty easy.
本当にもともと入ってるんですよ。で、まあディレイベースだってみんな言うけど、そういうことじゃなくて、
He laughs at this too.
僕がよく言ってる。
We see him say it's variable rollback. So more important is the frame setting. Now, chat room, I have a question. What's variable rollback? I'm not asking because I want an answer. I'm asking because I don't know. I'm not sure what he's trying to say by saying the game has variable rollback. My first guess was variable rollback is, you know, him referring to games like Skullgirls or games like Them's Fighting Herds, where you can set, you know, the start input delay, and then afterwards you have a set amount of frames that the game can roll back, right? So, like, I assume that that's what he was talking about, but instead I think he's talking about something very different. He's talking about whatever model Tekken is doing, and he just refers to it as variable rollback. You mentioned the Code Mystics things, right? And I thought maybe like you're on the right track, but then the thing he says after is, yeah.
まあ0からもちろん
He says many games set their values from 0 to anywhere between 1 to 6, with the maximum being 6 frames. And you guys know the sentence after this. It's everybody's favorite sentence. We set the maximum value for Tekken, say the line bar. We'll get there, don't worry.
というとこもあって割と今まではいわゆる
Tekken 7 is 3. Let's go back and go through these lines. So we get to this line, right? 0 to 6, right? He says many games have set their value from 0 to anywhere between 1 to 6, with the maximum being 6 frames. This is something that when he first said it, right, and he said Tekken 7 is 3, a lot of people were confused about this, right? Because we're like, what does that even mean? And then people even asked, remember Dan on Twitter asked like, okay, you say it's 0 to 6 and Tekken has a max of 3. Does that mean Tekken at, you know, it can roll back up to 3 frames, or like, you know, you say it's always 3 frames? How does that work, right? People are confused. And, you know, he's just like, nope, I said Tekken 7 is 3, read well. The first time he said it, a lot of people were like, is he talking about like what the delay is set to, or is he talking about the amount of frames the game can roll back? But the way he describes it here, he's clearly talking about rollback frames. But the thing is that if he's talking about the amount of frames the game can roll back, this 0 to 6 thing doesn't make much sense, right? If you guys have watched the NRS GDC talk, you know that NRS can roll back 8 frames, right? It's not 6, they can roll back 8 frames. KI does double that, right? KI is rolling back to something like 16 frames that it can roll back in the game. So 6 is like a really weird number here. So when he says many games set their values from 0 to anywhere between, you know, 6, like 6 being the max, I'm not sure exactly what he means. And also, on the other side, what games have this set to 0 or 1? Like what rollback games have this? I'm not sure. I don't know what this 0 to 6 situation is about, but it's the same thing that he mentioned before, so it's clearly important in some way. I mean, no, Street Fighter doesn't have 0. You see the game rolling back. Street Fighter's issue is not about the amount of frames it's rolling back, right? It's about the syncing issues that they have. This is a weird thing to think about, right? The 0 to 6. Many games set their values anywhere between 0 to 1 to 6, and 6 is the maximum frames. Like what he's talking about here, it's kind of unclear. And he says if we set the maximum value for Tekken, the animation can get janky even with rollback netcode because of the heavy load of prediction rollback. The thing is that this is another really interesting sentence, because the answer is like, yes. If you have rollback in your game, you are already choosing to sacrifice animation. That's one of the points about rollback. That's how the prediction model works. You accept that there's a lack of animations in certain situations, right? The animation get janky even with rollback netcode. It's like it should get janky with rollback. That's how rollback works, right? He says things move rather well even from the first frame. So it's difficult for 3D fighting games to incorporate a higher value. The thing is that, you know, Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct are 3D games, right? They have 3D models, their characters are 3D and stuff, right? And maybe he's saying that, you know, moving in and out of axes and stuff, like the 3D movement is what causes the problems. But specifically here, he's saying the animations, right, are having issues. So if you go look at the netcode article, right, I'm going to show you guys a Jago move, right? This is a standing medium punch from Jago. This is a 7-frame attack. Now, keep in mind, a lot of the moves in Tekken, like the jabs and stuff, are like 10 frames, right? 11-frame moves from a 3D model. This is a 3D model swinging a 7-frame attack. And this is with 3 frames out of the 7 frames of this attack have been rolled back. So you guys are missing like almost half the move. That was it. That was lag right there. And not only was that lag, that was severe lag. That was half of a move that 7 frames is gone. Slowed down 30%. Now imagine if instead of a 7-frame move, this is a 10-frame move. You know, sure, there's going to be some animation frames missing, but you have rollback in your game. You know there's going to be animation frames missing, right? That's part of the way it works. And also keep in mind that KI has a set amount of delay at the start, right? And then there are additional frames after where the rollback handles it. So your connection for you to lose 3 frames, right, to have a 3-frame rollback is going to be something serious, right? You're going to be playing somebody pretty far away. We have to assume he's not actually talking about animations of attacks and stuff here. Somebody mentioned like floor breaks and balcony breaks and that kind of stuff, right? You know, we talked about this the last time we talked about rollback with Tekken. There, I mean, with something like this, right, you just take whatever the maximum amount of frames that you can roll back are, and you just put in a check and you say like, okay, when a wall breaks, we'll take X amount of time to make sure that the wall break actually happened. We receive the data, we're sure the wall break, and then we'll trigger it. And, you know, other developers who've worked on rollback are like, yeah, when you have situations like that, or KO animation, right? The KO animation coming up early. That happens in Fightcade, for instance. When you have animations like that, you just delay the trigger for them until it's past your rollback frames. So now you know it won't happen.
でなのと、あとはゲーム処理の問題ですよね。ゲーム処理はもう間違いなく背景情報、キャラクター情報を含めてアニメーションの数、
Yeah, this makes
制御
sense.
してるエフェクトの数含めてもう
Yeah, rollback takes a lot of strain on the
振
game.
り切っちゃってるんですよね。もう処理は 100%。
If you look at the chart over here, right? Look at the NRS chart. Look at where it says performant, right? Take a look at performant on the chart. Rollback is not performant, right? Rollback does not perform as well. It's not as easy for the machine to handle because every frame of game, the game needs to be able to go back and re-simulate multiple frames at a time of the game and say, what would happen if instead of what we thought happened, but a different button was hit in this time period, simulate it, make that happen in one frame, and then make the next frame corrected for a rollback. It's a lot of power for the game to do that, right? It's not like it's easy. So Harada's saying like, you know, rollback takes a lot of strain. Right? That makes sense, right? I think we all agree. He says, we usually set the attribute to 3 frames at max. He didn't say it's always 3 frames. He just says, we usually set the attribute to 3 frames at max. Based on the current way Tekken plays, right? It's hard to say what these 3 frames are all about and how often these frames happen and what they're used for and that kind of stuff, right? Is he saying that sometimes the game has 3 frames of rollback available to it, and on more intensive stages or more in other situations it's variable and there could be 1 frame of rollback, 2 frames, 0 frames of rollback? Is that what he's trying to suggest, right? It's hard to say because a lot of the times, you know, it just feels like a standard delay based games, and then very rarely people see discrepancies where the game looks like potentially maybe it's rolling something back, but who knows, right? Who knows what's actually happening with these 3 frames? We're not sure.
アメリカでいうと例えば西海岸、東海岸とか。
I love this sentence. In particular, we learned that online play between West Coast and East Coast players in the US had difficulties. If you ask Tekken players about what it's like to play West Coast versus West Coast or East Coast versus East Coast, I'm sure they also have difficulties. Lots of people have rough times with people who live very close to them. I mean, there are people in Japan who have tough times playing other people in Japan, or people in Korea who have tough times playing other people in Korea, right? Like, it's not just, he can't say this, right? He can't just be like, our netcode's dog shit, but I can. So him saying this, yeah, this is a good goal to hit.
できるだけレスポンスですね。こうやっぱ手触り。
So there's like another thing to say quickly about West Coast versus East Coast as well, is like, if your rollback model is working correctly, you should be able to play West Coast and East Coast anyway, right? Like, that should be part of it. What he says here that's interesting is we're doing the best we can possible with the update so that the delays will be minimized. So he's talking, I'm sure, here about input lag, right? He's trying to say that the game has lower input lag and it's not increasing, right? Like it does in a delay-based model. He's saying the delay is lower and it stays there. It's not moving around and flying up and down, which is what you don't want. In a rollback model that works right, you have the delay frames here, and then everything afterwards is what the rollback catches, which is, I mean, that's a rollback model.
じゃあ本当にみんながディレイしてるっていうけど。
Yeah, he says delays can be minimized while maximizing the response. Go back to the chart. You look at it. It's one of the big things here. Responsive, right? Rollback is responsive. Lockstep is not responsive. It feels bad. You play against someone, it feels like all your inputs are getting eaten up, and it feels no good. I love this part. This is my favorite, maybe my favorite part about this.
いろんな国で試すんですよ、本当に。ホテルとホテルとかでやった
He
り
used to
とか。
test from the hotel he stayed in, and even went to overseas employees' houses to test things out. Could you imagine Harada just kicking in the door of a Bandai Namco employee's house, kicking his son off the television and being like, I gotta test this netcode? And then he plays someone who is like, you know, in the state away, and he's like, seems fine to me. Playing on Tekken 7's netcode and being like, seems good. Like, I don't know if I would have admitted this if I was him. You know, if you want to test if your rollback works, why don't you just play someone from Japan to the US, right? Like West Coast. Like 150, 170 ping or something. That's like the borderline of what you would probably want to play on as like a rollback connection, you know? Or like play someone in Korea. Simulate the lag in like a developer environment. I don't know. You know, if you want to lie, I get it. You can simulate it and test it, but you want a live environment. I get you, Harada. You got to kick in doors. I like your style. Players from the US, testing this bad
アメ
boy.
リカのプレイヤーとかにもちょっと手伝ってもらって、西海岸、東海岸とかで、まあ、ちょっとテスト。
Nice. This is good news, right? I think them giving the build to people early to test it is cool. It's a good idea to field test this kind of thing, right? Because You get people hands-on to say like, hey, this is what this feels like. Hey, this is what this doesn't feel like, etc. So we only know so far, I think, that Mark and Anakin have tried it, right? And they both said feels great. Anakin says it's an improvement. Markman says it feels like offline. So hopefully it feels better, right? Like that's all that really matters. I hope that whoever is helping them test it has played a lot of delay-based games, played a lot of games with rollback, and they're doing a good job of testing different scenarios against different people and stuff, right? If the new version feels great and plays great, then that's important, right? That's more important than Harada's definition of rollback or what they're even talking about in this talk. Who gives a shit? If it plays better and feels good, thumbs up, right? Fantastic. That's great. I'm just impressed. Markman said it feels like offline and it's great. Like Anakin was like, feels pretty good. Markman was like, feels like offline. It's fantastic. Boy, I hope it's good, Mark, for your sake, because man, if it's shitty, a lot of people are going to make fun of you. It's just a risky spot to put yourself in. It's like the Zero Issue boys all over again. People can say what they want, but I'm talking about my experience with Anakin. Doesn't matter. If you say it feels like offline, they'll remember it for the rest of your life. Rip says it already feels like offline, then they shouldn't change the netcode. It's already great. I just hope that it actually is great. You know what I mean? Because remember when Capcom updated their netcode and everybody was mad hype and everybody was like, it's fixed, right? On this very small sample size that we had in like the first few hours of the game. And then we still see these monstrous one-sided rollbacks. And I was like, guys, it's not fixed. And they're like, no, fuck you, Sajam, you're wrong. And then, where are we currently, chat room? Where are we currently with Street Fighter's netcode? So I hope for Tekken's sake that the netcode feels and is better. As long as it feels better, that's an improvement to what it currently is, you know? I love this line, too. This is probably the best thing he says here is, I can keep talking about it, but just go try it. I feel the same way. I listen to this and I hear lots of things where I'm just like, I don't know what's going on here, man. But the moral of the story is try it when it's out, you know, see how it feels when it comes out, and hopefully it's better. I can't be mad about somebody improving their online play. I do think it's very funny that Tekken 7 came out 5 years ago in the arcade, 3 years ago on console, and now they're like, we've had rollback in the game the whole time. It just hasn't been working right. We should probably fix it. A knee slapper. To just have hidden rollback no jutsu for years and years and years that they could have focused on fixing and then never been interested in doing it until now. Yeah, Street Fighter V's rollback's been shitty for 4 years, but we've known it's rollback, I guess, right? Sajam cites his sources, explains his points, and Harada says Tekken is 3. He must be right. That's how it works. It's like Among Us, you know? No matter how many times I just try to explain things, it doesn't matter. I'm like, I saw Harada go into the vent. Who knows, though? Who knows what happened, right? All I know is if it's better, that's good. E equals MC squared, and Tekken 7 equals 3.